On May 26th, protests began erupting across the nation and quickly across the world, calling for justice against the murder of George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man who was killed by a Minneapolis police officer. The protests sparked a worldwide discussion on racism and police brutality, but many fear the fight for justice against race-based violence often excludes black women and girls. Prior to the protests, journalist and television host Sunny Hostin called attention to the murder of Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old black woman who was killed by Louisville, Kentucky police officers in March.
I kind of just felt like, where is the outrage there where you have a frontline worker, an African-American woman in her home, shot dead by the police, and no one talked about it?
Though murders like Breonna Taylor and many others have gained notoriety, activists like Twitter user @LisaBadula are remaining vocal about the victims of police brutality who have not received the same exposure many others have, some criticizing the now popular phrases, say their names and say his name, with one Twitter user stating, "Every time you see someone put out say his name, let's gently correct them. Say her name was created because black, trans, and cis girls and women were and still are getting erased from the narrative around police violence." Senator Kamala Harris is amongst those speaking out against the pattern. Harris took to social media and hosted a conference with activist Brittany Packnett to discuss systemic changes needed for all victims of police brutality and to honor the life of Taylor.
We do have to keep saying her name.
That's right.
And we also have to recognize that in the movement, we've got a little more work to do in recognizing the women, and not one to the exclusion of the other. But
that's right.
We can't forget what's happening to Black women, Latinas across America in terms of how they're experiencing law enforcement.
Across the United States, more protesters are beginning to shout #SayHerName. But Packnett reveals there is still more work to be done.
We say Breonna's name and we continue to fight for accountability for Breonna. We've seen arrests in Ahmaud Arbery's case. We've seen arrests in George Floyd's case. There have been no arrests in the case of Breonna Taylor. So there is still a great deal of work to do all over the place, but most certainly in Kentucky.
Reporting for BronxNet, Kib and Aline.